What makes QCon software conferences stand out from other events? The top reason has to be the content, which focuses on innovator and early adopter trends, and presenters who are expert practitioners sharing their real-world stories. Deciding what topics to include in the conference starts with the QCon Programming Committee, and today I'm joined with some of its members. We're going to go backstage to get an understanding of how QCon London came together and why the trends that are being featured this year are important. So we've got a few people joining us today. I'm just going to let them all introduce themselves. We'll start with Chris.
So hi folks, I'm Chris Swan. My day job's an engineer at AtSign, where I'm helping to build a platform for end-to-end encryption. And I'm back on the program committee after quite a long break because my last job wouldn't let me do it. But I was on the program committee before for a few years.
And the next one in my little Zoom box is Srini.
Hi, Thomas. Hi, everybody. It's great to participate in this podcast and able to share what's coming up at the QCon London 2023 conference. About myself, I currently serve as the lead editor for data engineering and AI and ML community at InfoQ website. I have the opportunity to work with great members and great speakers in this capacity. Outside of that, I focus on data engineering and data processing areas as my main focus of expertise. Back to you, Thomas.
Then Sarah Wells.
Hi, I'm currently writing a book about microservices. Before that, I was a tech director at the Financial Times. I've been involved with QCon for a good few years, speaking, track hosting, and on the program committee for the last couple of years.
And finally, Werner.
Hi. Yeah, I have been on a few of these committees. I think the last count was above 20 or so. So it's been fun. And in my day job, my job title is Cloud Plumber at Wolfram. So whenever developers create leaks, I find them and tell them how to fix them. That's it for me.
So let's start with how QCon is different from other software conferences. What are the things that QCon does differently than the other conferences that people can attend out there?
So I think it starts with us getting together and essentially creating a framework for the conference that we want to attend ourselves. I've been going to QCon since the earliest days, and I think it's always been one of my favorite conferences. And so now that I get to help shape it, I'm kind of thinking, what do I want, and what do I think people like me that come to conferences want to have? And that gets us to sort of the themes for the tracks. And then we go off and find great track hosts who are going to go and find the individual speakers to fit into those themes. And there's, like good software development, there's a lot of iteration goes on in the early days to refine that as well.
Yeah, and I know QCon's one of the conferences that doesn't do a big open call for papers to have the speakers show up. How does that make a difference?
A lot of it comes from the track host. One of the things I really love about having track hosts is you get a very opinionated view on a particular topic. They get to shape the track. We'll have come up with a theme in the program committee, but the track host can find their take on that, and they go to their own connections, and also they can draw on the whole of the committee's connections. You tend to have a mix of experienced, good speakers and some rising stars where you want to encourage people who maybe haven't spoken before. So I think that's one of the things. The other thing that is really interesting about the kinds of talks that get scheduled at QCon is that it's very much about practitioners. You want to hear people talking about something they've actually done. And I think, as with Chris, I was an attendee. Well, so I was an attendee at QCon way before I was on the program committee. I always knew that I was going to learn about things that I was interested, that I'd been hearing a little bit about, that I wasn't quite sure about. I'd get that exposure by coming to QCon.
Yeah, and I think some of us have been in that track host role and the program committee. And what are the tracks at QCon like? I've heard it described as sort of a mini conference within a conference. Is that how you think of that, Srini?
Absolutely. Each track can be its own conference because, again, like Sarah mentioned earlier, right, we want to focus on the attendee as our target audience. What's best for the attendees? I mean, not only technologies, but also what should they be aware of in terms of leadership contributions in their companies, also the process improvements. So it's kind of a holistic experience when they come to the conference. and QCon actually provides that. So it can be seen as a multiple mini conferences. But again, I think more all of those kind of gel together because of the programming committee efforts. So if somebody is looking for technology expertise, innovations, and the process improvements, and not only what they are doing right now, but what they should be familiar with going forward, it's all kind of provided in one shop, one stop conference.
Yeah, and I think Sarah made a good comment about we've all been attendees before we were involved with QCon. I don't know if that was your case as well, Werner. That were you an attendee, and what did you get out of, or what do you think the attendees get out of QCon that they don't see at other conferences? Everyone says they love them so much, but what is it that QCon is different for the attendee perspective?
Well, at QCon, you hear practitioners speak. You don't hear people who just, who are just selling something, or who are just telling other people this is the great solution, but they have never actually used it. And that builds a certain trust where that person that tells me to use this language, they have suffered for that, right? They have the scars, and they can show them and say, okay, you showed me you use this language, and these are the pitfalls to avoid, and so on. So this is one of the big selling points. And of course, with QCon, you just get to meet people like creators of languages, creators of frameworks, where you think, I've been using this language for so long, I can get to ask Rich Hickey why Clojure, why a Lisp, and stuff like that, and he'll answer. And these people are very nice, actually. You can talk to them, and you think, oh, blimey, okay. These are just real people like me, sort of. So that's one of the selling points, I think.
Yeah, I know at other QCons I've seen people doing the selfies, like meeting your heroes. Like, I can't believe I get to see that person, and not just up on a stage, but you run into everyone in the hallways and discussing things over lunch. So QCon does have some recurring tracks. So we talked about how we break up QCon into the separate tracks, but there are some that always show up, and there's some that always show up in London specifically. One that I know is a big hit, has been around for at least a decade, is the architectures you've always wondered about. And that's, you said, Werner, the chance to, how did they build that thing? How did they hear about it? What's in the architectures you wanted to know about this year?
I should probably talk about that because I'm the program committee member for that. So the architecture we always wondered about it's absolutely the marquee track. The idea that people, we do it on the first day generally. It's giving you that exposure to tech leaders from leading companies talking about scale. And this year we have talks from Google talking about how they scale their global Cloud L7 load balancer. We've got Cloudflare talking about handling 1 trillion messages in Kafka. Zoom should be really interesting to hear about how they scaled up in response to the mass move to working from home with the pandemic. And Monzo on serving 7 million customers daily with a huge number of microservices that they deploy hundreds of times a day.
So Sarah's in charge of that track. What is, let's go to Srini. What's your track that you're most looking forward to?
Most looking forward to, I have to start with the 2 tracks that I am serving as the PC champion, the programming committee champion, right? The first one is innovations in data engineering, and the second one is AI ML trends, right? So I think both are, I think the attendees are going to get a lot out of these 2 tracks. I can say that, if there is one area that has seen exponential growth in last couple of years, especially last year, would be the data engineering side and the artificial intelligence and machine learning. So there are so many things to share with the audience, and we have the speakers and topics to kind of reflect that those developments and innovations happening in these 2 areas. So if I can summarize, Thomas, real quick, the data engineering track kind of provides a overview of all the different phases involved in a typical data engineering process. We have the data storage topic to show how to store objects on the cloud using Apache Pinot database by Neha. I know that's going to be an interesting topic, and how to kind of balance between scalability and performance and the typical cross-functional requirements that all data architects have to experience. We also have streaming data processing talk. Data streaming has been a big topic for last several years, right? So I mean that's going to stay even more popular, for some time to come. And we also have data change data capture, CDC, when using microservices. So this is an interesting use case. When you're using microservices, when they talk to each other, how do you actually manage the data behind the microservices, right? How do you replicate? How do you reconcile? So we are looking forward to Gunnar Morling is a speaker. So he'll be talking about a couple of different interesting design patterns involved in the CDC for microservices. Then we also have the data analytics, and as well as how to implement these solutions in the cloud. So those are definitely some of the talks that will be of interesting. On the machine learning side, again, no other industry has gone through the same growth that machine learning has seen in last year. Chat GPT, for example, right? We hear that 100 times every day. So yeah, there are a lot of good things happening here. Whether it's the transformers that are shaping out the machine learning space, or the NLP, natural language processing innovations, or the infrastructure itself for AI ML, how to deploy ML programs on the cloud, and ML ops, how to support ML after going to production, right? So we have these speakers and topics kind of representing all of these different innovations, including the real-time ML pipelines presentation, graph neural networks, how to apply machine learning techniques on graph data. And we all know graph data is everywhere, right? Whether it's collaboration platforms in the corporations, or those of social media, the connected data is everywhere. So how do we apply machine learning to that type of data will be the focus of this graph neural network presentation. And we also have ML ops, how to operationalize ML programs in production. This will be actually showcasing the DoorDash real world use cases. So it should be very interesting. And also we have a digital twins topic, which is getting a lot of attention in the industry, especially in the manufacturing, supply chain, and healthcare industries. How to virtualize the business processes, where it is very expensive to kind of create the simulated environments in the real world. So can we do that in the digital world, right? So create a digital twin, whether for a car or for a supply chain process. So we have a presentation on that. And finally, probably most importantly, the presentation on responsible and ethical AI by the track host Meharnush will highlight the importance of ethics and doing the AI ML the right way, and show us how to put these ethical practices into real projects and applications. So to summarize, we have great speakers and we have great topics lined up for our attendees this year. The attendees can expect and look forward to learning about the modern data architecture stacks, as well as the transformative innovations happening in the machine learning space.
Yeah, I appreciate that really encompasses, like, that sounded like an entire data software conference all by itself. But that's just two tracks you talked about, the ML and AI, and the emerging AI and ML trends and innovations in data engineering. They overlap a lot. And so somebody might go to all of those sessions, or they may say one session's right, and they go to other things. So you can pop on and get what you personally need.
And also we made sure that they are on 2 different days, Thomas. So if somebody wants to attend all of the data engineering talks and all of the machine learning talks, they can still do that. And that will be a good problem to have, right? So which one to attend at any point in the day. So
There's always the problem of there's too many sessions you want to go to. There's only 5 tracks or 6 tracks in a day, but you always have 2 sessions that are at the same time, and I always look for which one can I watch on the recording as soon as possible afterwards. I wanted to back up. So one of the topics that usually shows up in London is fintech, and there's a fintech track this year. Is that correct?
So we're calling it Tech of Fintech. And if I look at previous sort of iterations of the finance track for QCon London, it's been very focused on, I would say, kind of traditional financial services. So talks from people working in the big banks, etc. And normally there would be sort of 1 or 2 more fintech talks sprinkled in there. And to liven things up, what we've tried to do is sort of flip it this year. So the idea of the Tech of Fintech track, as we're calling it, is to get people from fintech startups, but also to get people that have adopted the same technology platforms as the fintech startups. And so we've seen that going on with, some cases, banks kind of having a newly launched name and a new engineering team to go with that. But sometimes it is just engineers within a particular team are picking up new approaches and applying them to the stuff that they're building. So we've been rooting those out as well. I'd particularly call out open source in banking is going to be one of the topics we're touching on. This has been, I think, a theme where there's been various attempts in the past to do stuff and kind of say, well, all of the banks are building kind of all of the same stuff. So why don't we open source it and mutualize it? And maybe that's now an idea where the time's finally come for it.
That's an interesting idea to talk about the technology, not just the companies and what they're doing. Looking forward to some of those. So we talked about the headline track, the architecture you always wondered about, and we got all the data and ML. What else for architecture focus? Because a lot of people that attend QCon are either senior engineers or architects or have that technical experience. It's not for the beginner entry-level roles. So there's a lot of architecture focus. What's on the architecture track this year?
So another new one for this year is architecting for sustainability. And we've previously had tracks that have been dedicated to sustainability, but with a sort of broader approach. So they haven't been focused on architecture. So this time around, we're actually focusing on the architectures involved in sustainability. And I think that's been a little more challenging in terms of finding stories. But I think we found some excellent stories, and the track hosts have done a really good job of getting speakers who can come along and talk about real world implementations of stuff and the architectures that lie behind them.
So what does the architecture for sustainability mean? Because sustainability has a couple different interpretations. There's the sustainable software that's going to live for a while and be maintainable and you can operate. But this, I think, is the green environment, the green software principles, and how do you make software that doesn't, consume more electricity and more energy and carbon than the entire airline industry, for example.
It's more about the latter, absolutely. And we find that flows over into a lot of considerations around performance. Because if you're using your underlying hardware thoughtfully, then that tends to be good from a carbon footprint perspective as well. And so, the story that we're getting from Goldman Sachs is really about how they've gone about systematically optimizing their estate so that it's got less of a carbon footprint, but that also means that it's got less of a dollar footprint. And I think that's something that all organizations are interested in. It's not just about environment and social responsibility concerns. It's about the financial concerns that go along with those as well.
That sounds easier to project to the shareholders. Like, we're going to increase our bottom line because we're going to spend less on our cloud footprint. Also, our software runs better, and we're doing having less of an environmental impact. So win-win for everybody, right?
Thomas, one more. I want to highlight one more track on the architecture. The title is Architecture in 2025. So this will be about what does architecture look like in the future? What is the role of software architect, which is, I know, one of your areas of passion as well, right? So
I think he's speaking on the track, Srini.
That is probably, yes, that's my talk. And again, the idea of not just what is architecture, but architecture in 2025. It is very clearly that opinion of how do we look forward to the future? Where are people heading? How are things changing? So how has the role of an architect evolved? Was, as you said, something I've definitely talked about. We've covered things about this on the InfoQ trends report for the last several years. So there's going to be a lot of things that you see on those trends reports that I'm hearing you guys talk about as topics for the conference. The AI trends, the data engineering trends, the sustainability trends. So it's been, top of mind for us as early innovator and early adopter for the last few years, and that's why they're topics at QCon.
Yeah, I think it was interesting when we were thinking about the themes, was that we decided that there really wasn't a space for a microservices track. So where we probably would have had microservices as an architectural thing in previous QCons. Now it's like, well, that is just something people do. Where do you go? What do you talk about with the architecture? What's coming next?
So Werner, we haven't heard from you yet. What's one or two of the tracks that you're most looking forward to?
Well, I'm biased because the ones I'm looking forward to are the ones I'm managing. And talking about microservices, the one I'm looking forward to is debugging in production. And one of the problems with microservices is, of course, always you can't just attach a debugger to 50 microservices and then step through all of them. So you need some better ways. And in this track, we're looking at it. We're looking at observability and tracing and things like that. And just generally, how do you debug a system with all of these things happening at the same time? And I'm not going to go into details. We have a great website, and there's some really exciting stuff on there. And then the other track is somewhat related. It's sort of our second sustainability track, except we call it performance because we're old school. Because as Chris just mentioned, to be green, you can just do less or do it with fewer cycles. And we have a really exciting track. It's hosted by Justin Cormack. He found some amazing speakers there. We have, just to highlight one talk, we have speakers from Red Panda, which is a reimplementation of Kafka with a strong focus on, I guess as Martin Thompson calls it, mechanical sympathy, right? Really writing the software so that it works with the hardware, it maximizes the hardware. And that's just one of the exciting developments recently to see people really focusing on this. The performance track is another one that I'm really looking forward to here.
So Chris, you already mentioned the architecture with sustainability. There's another sustainable or socially conscious software. I think Srini mentioned ethics a little bit. That's one of those topics that has been at QCon for several years. We've always had this kind of nebulous, like maybe one talk, maybe a whole track. Is that what the socially conscious software is getting into?
Yes, and I think that track, from a sort of title and abstract perspective, gave us scope to go beyond just ethics. So we have previously had an entire track of ethics, and I think that was an interesting approach, but also we don't want to be having the same people doing the same talks again and again. So we've changed it a little and given ourselves scope to get some different speakers telling some different stories.
And then the last category of QCon, and InfoQ has these same topics across the personas, is the culture and methods track. I know people are probably familiar with Shane Hasty has the other InfoQ podcast. He'll be there running the unconference. But there's two tracks that I thought were under that culture and methods. One is the Staff Plus engineering, and the other one is remote and hybrid work. And again, these have been around for a couple of years. What's the current trends that we're expecting to see, and why are those two topics important at QCon? Sarah?
So Staff Plus, it's interesting because I think it's still, particularly in the UK, perhaps individual contributor path hasn't been talked about as much. People last year on that who came to the talks on that track were really interested to work out, what does it mean? How do I shape a career that doesn't involve going into management or leadership? So I think that it's still early, and a lot of the I'm not actually overseeing that, but the talks I think will cover a variety of things around what skills do you need to stay on the technical track, and what can you expect? Where are the challenges that you're going to have as a result of doing that? And a lot of that comes down to, how do you influence when you're not actually someone's manager? You don't get to tell someone that they need to do something. How do you, as an individual contributor, affect change? And then the other one was a remote and hybrid work. Well, that's just an interesting thing, and it will be interesting at the moment every year, because 3 years ago, it was, how do we all work from home? Well, but now it's like, what's come next? And you've got lots of companies that were doing fairly remote work and starting to look at hybrid, starting to call back people back into the office some part of the week. I think that's incredibly difficult to do. So it's really interesting to hear from people about how they've made something like that work.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone else had this experience at the QCon San Francisco last year and some of the QCon Plus that have been online. The remote and hybrid work sessions, the talks, have been the most surprising. Like, I think I go to the technical talks and I have a sense of what I can expect. I'm going to gain some knowledge about a tool or technology I don't know. Those talks have the power to surprise you because you don't know what is going on. And I think you can also take it back and use it the next day. I might not be able to implement Kafka next week, but I can say, hey, we can try this out, bring it up in a retro and say, why don't we try this idea that I heard about at QCon? So that's a great opportunity that the audience can take right back to work with them.
I agree. I think it's one of the really nice things about QCon is that it's a conference that covers those kinds of people and culture and process topics as well. And we aim to have one track of that for each day. So if you wanted to spend your time digging deep into culture and methods, you can do it. But if you're going to a conference that's about particular technologies, you don't necessarily get that opportunity. So I think it is, totally people should at least dip into some of those talks because it'll be a different perspective potentially.
I think that covered all of the main tracks. Is there anything else people wanted to bring up that we didn't talk about for the specific tracks and themes of QCon?
So we didn't talk about security.
We never talk about security until it's too late, do we?
We brought security back onto the menu, and specifically, we're talking about building security in earlier. So this whole concept of shifting left, and getting some practitioners to talk about how they've done that and what they've accomplished in doing that. And I'm really looking forward to some of those stories myself, because I think security is one of those things where if you don't focus on it early in the cycle, then it comes back to bite you later on, and it can be annoying and expensive.
We also didn't talk about the other track that I'm the champion for, which is about paving the road. So this is about developer productivity and experience. And this is coming at it from an engineering point of view, but obviously it will talk about culture and methods as well. And the host, Nayana Shetty, has really focused on user-centric approaches to engineering enablement. So how do you treat your platform as a product? We'll hear from companies like Netflix and the BBC about the ways they've approached that. I think it's a topic I'm really interested in, and I think it's going to be a great track.
Yeah, we've talked about the paved road in the past and how it's good, but this is actually how to go and pave the road and the benefits you get of it.
And to get that product mentality for teams that have other developers as customers, and this is my background. I was a tech director for engineering enablement at the Financial Times. It's like, how do you manage to get that product view on things? I think that's an important development for people.
Yeah. I think it started off with a few people saying, I'm going to write a script to make my life easier. And then that became like a Jenkins job or something else. And like, it's just evolved into now we need that as a product that people need for specific to your company. And it's not something you can just buy off the shelf and have exactly what you need. You have to put some time and effort into making it what your organization needs, right?
I mean, I'd argue you should buy at least parts of it off the shelf.
Oh, yes. Yeah. You shouldn't build the whole thing.
It needs to be in the context of your organization to make it really work.
You need to be able to pave your own road, but hire the trucks to bring over the asphalt.
Yes.
I did want to wrap up with some of the logistics of QCon. So I know this is the first one where we're doing in person and online at the same time. The last few have been staggered by a month. So how does that work for people who might not be able to make it to London but still want to get the content?
Well, I believe that the videos for online will go up at the same time as the conference starts, which is a challenge for speakers because that means they have to get their talks ready ahead of time, but should make for a really great experience for whether you're coming in person or online.
I'm assuming there'll be online discussions as well that people can then engage afterwards.
And also there won't be any online disruptions because the recorded video will be available, right? So
that's right. It's a pre-recorded videos for all of the sessions, so you can watch it, but it won't, have I couldn't turn my camera on and technical difficulties. QCon has done a pretty good job of the online presentation of making sure that those sessions all run smoothly.
I think we can say like we have followed a shift left approach for the conference as well, right? So for organizing the talks.
I think that same plan of the online at the same time is what's going to happen in QCon New York in June and then QCon San Francisco in October. So 2 more coming up if you can't make it to London. Think about those. Well, I want to thank all of my guests today, Chris, Srini, Sarah, and Werner. And if you enjoyed this discussion of software trends, please leave a comment on the podcast, either on the InfoQ page or wherever you get this, because we want to know if we want to have similar conversations like this with the future QCon organizers. So if you want to know more about QCon London, it's still time. There's still time to register for the conference, either in person or online at QConLondon.com. And registration's open, as I said, for QCon New York and QCon San Francisco. So thanks again for listening to another episode of the InfoQ podcast.